Assalamu alaikum students, welcome back to the e-lecture number 2 of your Pakistan studies, chapter number 1, that is the history of Pakistan. Let's have a quick recap of what we've learned so far. We've had a particular look at the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto era and the main aspects of the economic reforms during his tenure, that is from 1971 to 1977, where he nationalized the industries, banks and insurance companies. He announced the new labor policy and announced the agriculture reforms for the farmers. Then we had a look of what were the impact of nationalization on industry, education, commerce and trade. We discussed the positive impacts and negative impacts in all of these sectors. Now in today's lecture, we will be learning about the key aspects of the 1973 Constitution. We will comprehend the major aspects of the Islamization process during 1977 to 1988, and also we will be taking a look at the Junejo government, which is from 1985 to 1988. Okay, so let's have a look at the key aspects of the 1973 Constitution. Basically, 1973 Constitution is regarded as the landmark accomplishment of Bhutto's era, as it was a unanimous act of the parliament with complete consensus of all the political parties. The constitutions of 1956 and 1962 failed to provide the aspired political stability to the country. Both were proved short-lived and were replaced with the martial laws in the country, and then Pakistan lost its eastern wing as well. So the leftover country was first governed by a unique proposition of civilian chief marshal administrator, which is the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. So basically he is the first chief marshal administrator of Pakistan. So the National Assembly constituted a committee headed by Hafizuddin Pirzada to formulate the permanent constitution for Pakistan. The committee did its work in shortest possible time, and the National Assembly adopted the constitution on 10th April 1973 unanimously. Okay, so now let's delve into the key aspects of the Constitution of 1973. We have 12 points in this regard, and the first point is preamble. What does preamble means? Preamble means the introductory part of a deed stating its purpose, aims and justification. So what is the preamble of Constitution of 1973? That was the Objectives Resolution, which was included in its introductory part, which states the obvious that the sovereignty belongs to Allah Almighty and the people's representative would use their powers as a sacred trust within the limits of the Quran and Sunnah. This was basically made a regular part of the 1973 Constitution through an amendment in 1985. So basically in 1985, when there was the Islamization process happening in Pakistan. The second point states it's a written constitution. Definitely it's a written document which comprises of 280 articles, 12 sections and 6 judicial records. The third point tells about the constitution, that what kind of state Pakistan is, and it states that it is a federal state and consists of 4 provinces, federal capital and adjoining tribal areas which are called FATA, federally administered tribal areas. So basically वफाक के ज़ेरे इंतज़ाम क़बाइली इलाका जात, which were basically the semi-autonomous tribal regions in northwestern Pakistan, and they were merged with the neighboring province Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in 2018. And PATA, that is the provincially administered tribal areas. So what is the difference between FATA and PATA? Basically the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Provincial Assembly has no power in FATA and can exercise its powers in provincially administered tribal areas only, for that which is part of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The fourth point states that it is a semi-rigid constitution, meaning that the amendment is neither too difficult nor too easy. A 2/3 majority of the parliament, which is the National Assembly and the Senate, is required to make an amendment in the constitution. Then the fifth point comes of the national language. since there was no issue of East Pakistan no more. So definitely the national language was declared as Urdu, but the official language was still English and is still English. And it was also stated that a period of 15 years, arrangements will be made to implement the status of Urdu as the official language, but this has not been possible so far. Then the sixth point states the Islamic Constitution. It briefly describes the state religion of Pakistan, which is Islam. It also describes the official name of the state, which is the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. And the president and the prime minister should also be Muslims of Pakistan. Like any non-Muslim cannot be a state, the head of our state. It also encourages the practice of the Islamic mode of life among the citizens, and steps will also be taken to abolish interest, which is sood basically, and zakat, awqaf and ashur will be enforced in the country. Basically, awqaf and ashur are the Islamic taxes, so they will be enforced in the... The seventh point tells us about the judiciary, that the judiciary will be ensured is independent and the judges will be paid handsome salaries and have job security. The judiciary has been separated from the executive and the judges will perform their duties without any fear or pressure in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. The eighth point tells us about the parliament of our country. The eighth point states parliamentary constitution. So according to the Constitution of 1973, the National Assembly will have a tenure of 5 years. A parliament form of government was implemented in the country and the head of the country was the president, while the prime minister is the head of the government. The president is elected by the parliament and the provincial assemblies, whereas the prime minister is elected by a majority in the National Assembly. The ninth point tells us about the supremacy of the constitution. Like if any person abrogates the constitution or tries to abrogate it, he will be charged with high treason and prosecuted accordingly. Abrogate meaning is basically to revoke or to overrule or... So the 10th point states the institutions of our constitution. The Constitution of 1973 has set up several institutions like the Council for Common Interest, National Economic Council, National Finance Commission, Election Commission of Pakistan and Federal Ombudsman, etc. These institutions work within their limits and prefer national interest. The 11th point tells us about the legislature of our country. The legislature is bicameral, which means that it consists of 2 chambers. Now what are those chambers? The first chamber is the upper house and the second chamber is the lower house. The upper house basically consists of the Senate, which is the supreme house, and the lower house consists of the National Assembly. The provinces have been given equal representation in Senate and it is a permanent house. Its tenure is of 6 years. So basically Senate's tenure is of 6 years, and before that we read about the National Assembly and that tenure, its tenure was of 5 years. So the Senate members consist of 104 and the National Assembly members consist of 342, which makes the total number of the members of the parliament, which is the Majlis-e-Shura, is 446. The 12th point indicates about the fundamental rights of our citizens. The citizens have all the fundamental rights. The parliament and provincial assemblies cannot make any law that negates any fundamental right. Now we will be discussing about the General Zia-ul-Haq era. Let's have a look at who was actually Zia-ul-Haq. Basically, Zia-ul-Haq saw action in World War II as a British Indian Army officer, and then opting for Pakistan in 1947 and fighting as a tank commander in the Indo-Pakistani War of 1965. So basically he was serving in the 65 war. Then in 1970 he led a military training mission in Jordan. Basically the Palestinian Liberation Organization under the leadership of Yasser Arafat, they were fighting against the Jordanian armed forces. And in that military action, he trained the military forces of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. which provided instrumental defeat to the Black September insurgency against King Hussein. King Hussein was the king of Jordan. So because of that, the Prime Minister of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he appointed Zia-ul-Haq as the Chief of Army Staff in 1976. He was basically given a preferential treatment and was superseded against a senior in his rank and was made Chief of Army Staff by our own Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in recognition of his services in the Georgian War. But then Zia was the one who disposed Bhutto in a military coup and declared martial law on 5th July 1977, where Bhutto was controversially tried by the Supreme Court and executed less than 2 years later for allegedly authorizing the murder of Nawab Muhammad Ahmad Khan Kasuri, a political opponent. Okay, so you all know that East Pakistan was separated from West Pakistan in 1971. And after 1971, there were elections being held in 1977. Now, as you can recall, the elections of 1971, where Pakistan People's Party emerged as the strongest party in the West Pakistan, and it totally negated the Mujibur Rahman's government, which led to the demise of East Pakistan. So it was speculated that Pakistan People's Party will not gain majority in this election. But the opposite happened. Pakistan People's Party won with great majority and elections were regarded as rigged and a movement known as Nizam-e-Mustafa was started. At that time, 9 political parties joined hands with each other to create an alliance named the Pakistan National Alliance. This alliance was created specifically against Bhutto during the elections of 1977. Maulana Mufti Mahmood of Jamiat-e-Ulama-e-Islam, he was the head of the alliance, and basically Maulana Mufti Mahmood is the father of Maulana Fazlur Rahman. So he was leading this national alliance, and side by side we see other politicians as well, such as Chaudhry Zahoor-Ilahi, which is the father of Chaudhry Shujaat Hussain of Pakistan Muslim League. Then we see Maulana Maududi of Jamaat-e-Islami, Shah Ahmad Nurani of Jamiat-e-Ulama-e-Pakistan, and Air Marshal retired Asghar Khan of Tehreek-e-Istiqlal. So a political unrest was created in Pakistan, and when the elections were held on 7th March 1977, the National Alliance blamed it rigging the polls and boycotted the provincial elections held on 10th March. The elections were declared invalid and the movement of Nizam-e-Mustafa was. When the situation was beyond control, Mr. Bhutto invited the National Alliance for negotiations. The negotiations were still in progress when Army Chief of that time, General Zia-ul-Haq, who overthrew the Bhutto government and declared martial law on 5th July 1977. He promised to hold the elections just after 90 days, but he ruled over the country for about 11 years from July 1977 to August 1988. General Zia-ul-Haq was killed in an air crash on 17th August 1988. So Bhutto was basically hanged in Pindi, and while General Zia-ul-Haq was killed in an air crash. So you can assess the political unrest in the country at that time. Then the chairman of Senate, Ghulam Ishaq Khan, he took over as the caretaker president of Pakistan. Okay, moving on to our next topic, which is the major aspect of the Islamization process during 1977 to 1988. Okay, before starting off with this topic, let us discuss why the Islamization process was started. There are different popular opinions, and one of the popular opinion is that basically Zia-ul-Haq belonged to a religious family, so he had a religious background. Therefore, he wanted to establish Islam in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Then there was a popular conception that every government paid only lip service to Islam and no sincere effort was made in this direction. The ruling class had rather resisted the enforcement of Islam, but General Zia was aware of such feelings, so he directed his attention to the taking of practical measures. But another very unpopular opinion is that this basically was all a process to direct the country for the Afghan Jihad war. In other words, we were producing mullahs and jihadis for our Afghan war. Okay, so what points were basically taken in this regard? Let us discuss that now. So the first step that he introduced was setting up a Sharia court. The Sharia court was set up, which enjoyed the status of high court, and it comprised of high court judges and some renowned ulmas. If anyone claims a law to be repugnant to Islam, after hearing the court can announce it as null and void. However, it heard cases concerning only to Islamic law. So you can see the ulmas, they were given high priority against the lawyers, and this is how their stature was increased. Now the second point comes for the implementing Sharia ordinance. So what was introduced in that ordinance? Basically, 4 punishments were enforced by an ordinance on 10th February 1979. In Sharia ordinance, we basically deal with the issue of had, or which is known as hudud, which deals with adultery. So the punishments that he included were cutting off hands for theft, 100 lashes and stoning for death for adultery, and 80 lashes for drinking and for false accusation of adultery. Appeal against these punishments could only be made in Sharia court. However, not even a single culprit was awarded these punishments. Now, when you hear these kind of punishments, obviously you feel a bit repulsive to this law, but you can see that in Saudi Arabia this is also practiced, and everybody adheres to that law. But Pakistan is a country which even the Islamic Republic of Pakistan was named after, like in the 73 constitution. Some of the liberals say that this is not the Pakistan of Quaid-e-Azam. Quaid-e-Azam was a liberal man. So basically enforcing these hudud ordinance, you're actually not propagating Quaid's Pakistan. Anyhow, moving to the third point, which is the Zakat and Ushr ordinance. Zakat is annually deducted from savings account and GDP funds when received on the first Ramadan, while Ushr was collected from those landlords whose yield exceeded 948 kg of wheat. So both are the Islamic taxes. The government of Zia created such an atmosphere where acting upon Islam was appreciated and opposing Islam was disliked and disapproved. And in this very regard, the abolition of interest was also introduced. Abolition means khatama, basically sood ka khatama. Then, to inculcate Islamic thinking in students, General Zia ordered to review all textbooks and anything repugnant to Islam and to the ideology of Pakistan was deleted. Islamiyat and Pakistan studies were made compulsory and were introduced in all sorts of educational institutions. The religious institutions were officially patronized and its degrees were recognized by government. The sixth point tells us about the prayer arrangements. Arrangements were made for attending the Zohar prayers in the government offices and schools. Nazmin-e-Salat was appointed, who used to arrange the management of the prayers and urged the people to offer prayers. In the beginning, the high government officers and headmasters, etc., were sued to attend the congregation with punctuality, but with the passage of time, relaxation crept in, and even Nazmin abandoned their task. Then comes the Ehtaram-e-Ramadan ordinance. To enforce the respect for Ramadan, a special ordinance was released according to which smoking, drinking, eating publicly was prohibited, and anyone found doing that could be imprisoned for 3 months or could be fined for ₹500 at that time. Media broadcasted special programs during Ramadan. All food markets were used to be shut down during Ramadan, as opposed to what we see today. But then again, in Saudi Arabia, this is all has been practicing, and it's been practicing for so long that it's a norm there. Then comes the point for the religious schools, which we've already discussed before, that the many religious schools were looked after by the government and they were given annual grants. Their degrees were considered equal to MA. Arabic was introduced as compulsory subject from grade 6 to grade 8. To do research in fiqh and principles of Sharia and some other disciplines, Islamic International University was set up in Islamabad in 1981. Then a Sharia faculty was set up in the Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad, which would provide teaching of hadith, fiqh and Islamic law. General Zia is a controversial figure in the history of Pakistan. He was opposed by the elite class of Pakistan because obviously for the Islamization process, who were dissatisfied with his rapid Islamization of Pakistan. Political ulama supported Zia, but argued that Islamizing the country was not Zia's job. Instead, he should hold elections and transfer power to the elected representatives who will then enforce Islam. Okay, so Muhammad Khan Junejo was basically a powerful landowner and an agriculturist. He gained public notice when he joined the Ayub administration and subsequently held cabinet portfolio of railways, health, communications and labor from 1963 to 1969. After participating in the elections held in 1985, he was chosen to form the government on a Pakistan Muslim League's platform, of which he took over the party's presidency. So General Zia-ul-Haq amended the 1973 constitution from parliamentary to a presidential system. The president had complete powers and the powers of the parliament were curtailed, means were lessened. So General Zia-ul-Haq took the oath as the president for the next 5 years and Muhammad Khan Junejo took the oath as the prime minister. So now let us see what substantial events took place in his first step he took after becoming the prime minister was that he declared that martial law should be lifted. General Zia-ul-Haq's martial law had completed 8 years in 1985. So then the parliament and provincial assemblies passed bills to lift it, which was done on 30th December 1985. In Muhammad Khan Junejo's era, the Muslim League was revolutionized. All the non-party members of the National Assembly formed an official parliamentary group in January 1986, which was named as the Pakistan Muslim League, and Muhammad Khan Junejo was elected as president. The provincial chief ministers became Muslim League's provincial presidents, and Muslim League was organized as a political party and its primary unit started enrollment at the lower level. Then moving on to the third point, Muhammad Khan Junejo welcomed the foreign world. Since the lifting of martial law and restoration of democracy was even welcomed by the foreign world. Muhammad Khan Junejo made successful tours of Turkey, Germany and the United States of America in 1986. Different agreements of mutual interest were signed during these tours. The Muhammad Khan Junejo's modesty, honesty and national spirit was very much liked by the public. The 7 Marla housing scheme and the 5-point development program and plans to raise the literacy rate was appreciated. With all going well, there comes a disaster. And the disaster was the Ojri camp disaster. A sudden fire had broke out in an arms depot located between Rawalpindi and Islamabad in 1988. Many citizens were killed in this disaster. After hectic efforts of 1 week, it was brought under control. The Prime Minister was on a tour of Sindh and the President on a tour of Kuwait. Both returned immediately to Islamabad. The Prime Minister formed an investigation committee and its report was presented to President Zia-ul-Haq. This Ojri camp disaster led to the dismissal of the Junejo government. Some people are of the view that Junejo wanted to end the bloodshed in Afghanistan and had allowed the Russian retreat from Afghanistan, which was opposed by President Zia-ul-Haq, and all these political grievances were created. So then when a parliamentary inquiry was provided to overlook this incident of Ojri camp, President Zia surprisingly announced to have dissolved the parliament using the 8th Amendment, while the Prime Minister called a press conference on 29th May at the airport and answered the questions of the news reporters. On the same day, the President declared dismissal of the Junejo government and dissolution of all assemblies in a press conference held in Army House. This is how 3 years regime of Muhammad Khan Junejo ended. This marks the end of our topic for today. And in this video, we have discussed two very important topics which have also come in your past papers. The first question that is very important is explain the efforts made for Islamization between 1977 to 1988. This has come as a long question in your subjective part, and this question has been asked in 2015, 2016, 2018 and 2019. Then we have another question, describe the important aspects of the 1973 Constitution. This is also a long question and it has come in 2016 and 2017. So don't forget to put extra effort